and moo bi lan la seetal gestionnaire yaa ngi nii borode yaa ngi nii mu ne déedéet borode jigéen rek du ko sol damay indi borode jigéen indi borode góor laaw la cat kii daal ne na xam nga lu muy bañ ñoo dugg ci bitig bi ne nangam lay ut ñu ne amut lépp lu jigéen di soxla rek mu ngi ci bitig bii rawat na nag tubaarikàlla scrub yi nga xam ne moo xew si jamono ndax nee na buggatul benn yaram yàqu scrub yaa ngi nii body scrub yi face scrub yaa ngi day and night loo bugg rek ci jigéen mu ngi ci bitig bii cuuraay yaa ngi fi house spray yaa ngi fi waaye foundation yi ana powder yi qualité gestionnaire fii nag la am ci Westfield qualité gestionnaire nëbuwul maa ngi ni kuy nëbbatu du ko wax mu ngi ne fanga ca kaw nag koolaat 753 4495 25 00 124 ñaari nomba yi boo ci oo ñu uyu la xale yaa ngi fi koo laaj mu waxal la qualité gestionnaire and more.
Greetings once again. This is your favorite program that comes your way on every Sunday from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock, which is Bankola Kuwo. And this week, our guest is Dr. Ensa Touray, a historian or a history lecturer at the University of the Gambia, who is well known and understands the history of the Gambia and the world at large. So, greetings, Mr. Touray.
Yeah, thank you so much. I also thank you for welcoming me and inviting me to this very important forum on the matters regarding the Gambia and worldwide.
Thank you very much, Doctor. As we all know, Gambia, we are heading to another independence again, which is going to be on this Saturday coming. With the Gambia, Gambians are going to celebrate again. And if you look at it, since 1965 up to date, there's a lot of years and a lot of things happen. But also there are things that has also happened before the independence also, you understand that. So, but at first, I will just ask you, how was Gambians' interaction, social interaction, before before the coming of the Europeans here? How were we interacting amongst us?
Thank you so much. Since we are dealing with the theme of independence, it is important for us to actually look at the background and what actually constitutes independence analysis. When we talk about independence, which means something actually was actually established or imposed upon you, whether it is in the economy, whether it is in politics, or whether it is on the cultural area also, and which means that there were actors in place who actually hegemonize, which means control the system and ensure that what you have and what you have, according to your own primordial establishment, were actually dismantled, and they impose a new form of control where you are not actually operating according to your own needs and demands, according to your own free will. So that actually, what we can say, constitute what is a control of the people. So which means that is the seesaw of your independence completely. Well, before we go into the independence, we need to look back to understand what happened in Africa. Whether Africans were actually, what kind of independence we're talking about. Because when you look at the nation states in Africa, you look at the nations, you look at the people, you have cultural diversity. You have to understand Africa has never been a place that actually was actually dependent on any outside forces for anything. One thing I would like to tell you, within the framework of actually independence, Africa was actually self-contained. What do we mean by self-contained? Whatever actually is actually considered to be a need and the demand of human being, whether actually naturally or whether instinctively, whatever, is embedded on African soil. So that is why you could see that Africa never actually adopt any commitment in any form, whether in the military form, in the political form or cultural form, to move out to establish their suzerain or to establish their control over the people, either politically, because they want to control people to dictate policies, and in dictating policies, they want to actually determine which form of production system in the economy should be actually in place in order for them to be able to do extraction in order to build a home. We didn't need anything from outside. We were self-contained, that there was no adoption to go and colonize. That's why we didn't colonize ourselves. So therefore, when we talk about Africa, we talk about the birth of humanity. We talk about cradle of humanity. When we talk about cradle of humanity, we talk about where the first human and first human organization, civilization, or order, where was it actually created? It was in Africa. And the first man on the earth was a black man, and was actually created in Africa itself. The first man was created in Africa, and we can say that we supply humanity and we supply civilization, all part of the world. You get me? So after, when we talk about the Nilotic, that is the civilization around the Nile, all the pharaohs, all the people in Ethiopia, in Sudan, Nubia, and whatever, they were the early areas of human civilization. And people started moving down to the other hemisphere. And that is why Africa supplied humanity to all other parts of the world. So the entire world was highly dependent on Africa in many ways. If you ask me a question how, even the holy books we are seeing on all the time, why was it that Prophet Jacob was sending his children to go and buy cereal from Egypt? What does that constitute? It talked about global economy at that time. African zone of ancient Egypt was a core area in the early global system. Within the framework of early world system, they were not actually dependent, but they were core, which means they supply, also they control the production system, they control technological system, they control the knowledge that was supplied to other people. So which means other people were dependent on Africa in terms of needs in so many areas. So this is where we can understand pre-colonial ancient African independence. Because the Quran confirmed that Joseph's father sent his children, not so? Joseph himself was sold where? He was sold in Egypt. So Africans need to read their history in order for them to understand what independence really constitutes. Independence does not constitute hoisting the flag to represent your national cultural symbols. And saluting is not about that. It constitutes a lot in human context, in so many contexts. So we need, if we are dealing with independence in our Gambia, we are coming to that later. We are not dealing with the historical narratives. Since we are far away from the period, Gambia became a nation state within Africa, and Africa became a continental zone within the framework of world system. Therefore, we need to look at our condition within the framework of world system to understand whether we are dependent or we are influencing anything. Independence is about establishing, reposition yourself from the circle of control and reposition yourself to influence anything in many areas of human needs and the needs of your people.
Yeah, so Doctor, therefore we understand that Africa was resourceful, and we are going to talk about the Gambia, and you've just made some narratives regarding how Africa was, and economically, socially, how Africa was. But now, let us check the Gambia before the coming of the Europeans
And
the Arabs. How was people's interaction in this country before, and how did that at the end of the day became impacted by the coming of Europeans, and which also eventually led to exporting some of our resources, and at the end of the day we struggle until the time that we happen to have our independence, and one can even say still we are struggling as Gambians. But then first, how did Europeans coming into this country impacted our economy and our socially and economically? So.
Yeah, when you say that European, you are talking about the beginning of the Western capitalist advancement in the 15th century. Is that the epoch that actually marked the African participation in the global system? No. Well before, Europe actually took a part of capitalist expansion in the world. Africa has been actually active player in the world system. Was Atlantic trade was it the only trading system? Was it the first trading system in which Africans' participation could be eminent? Was it? Are you telling me, which means that you are telling me that the coming of the European in the 15th century marked the beginning of our participation, which means our civilization as people was actually catalyzed or inspired by the coming of European, which means you are killing us in the historical context of human evolution and civilization. Well before Europe actually emerged, where was ancient Ghana as a political entity in the world system? Where was ancient Mali after the downfall of Pharaonic Empire? Where was Songhai Empire? And you have to look at all these things and trying to connect yourself, because I thought we can't talk about Gambia in the pre-colonial context, in isolation of all these ancient civilizational entities. These are the areas that we need to look at in a pre-colonial context. After the downfall of Pharaonic Empire, after the invasion of Cambyses, it is understood that people came to West Africa and established some political entities through their interaction and orientation. One thing you need to understand conceptually because we are not supposed to analyze Gambia in isolation of global system, Africa in isolation. A form of trading system that connect Africa to the other part of the world, up to the Middle East, up to the Mediterranean, was through Sahara. Was through Sahara as an ecological avenue that actually link, but it's a kind of an avenue that facilitates interaction. So the Arab had all the means of mobility, especially territorial means of mobility like what? Horses, donkeys, and camels. So that facilitated our interaction with that. Look at that after the death of Prophet Muhammad and the rise of Muslim dominance in the Middle East. You have to understand that Muslims, Arab, controlled the three major centers in the world. They became core powers in the world system. But the question is, where was Africa? What actually did, how? What was the position assumed by the Africa as a continent? Was it actually a position of dependent, a position of periphery? We need to first of all look at the background to understand what position Africa actually assumed in the global system during the pre-colonial period. When actually, first of all, first global system was actually dominated or was actually comprised or dominated by our relation with the Arab world through Sahara at that point in time. Arab domination in the north or in the Middle East actually as a world power at that time does not mean or did not mean that Africa was actually a periphery or dependent on any part of the world in terms of supply or in terms of supply of the basic needs like what we are doing now today. We have ground, fertile ground in the Gambia, but we are still dependent on the Western capitalist market for our basic needs like rice and other things. Was Africa in that place? Was Africa positioned as dependent region or continent in that world system? No. That was why when the Arab came down to infiltrate, to penetrate into Africa, just to actually loot our gold resources, we were able to actually establish strong political system and strong political condition and strong territorial political consolidation with adopting new policies to ensure that Arabs were completely constrained from looting directly from our gold mines. So that confirmed that these people were very, very strategic in terms of their relationship with outside world. They protect the territory and the areas, production areas, and also they protect the gold mines so that outsiders who just wanted to come and loot will carry it away. They established Ghana Empire and adopted custom policies where Arabs were completely constrained from getting access to loot for more than almost 200 years. But if you compare it to the modern system, look at these people about almost 1,000 years ago. They were jealous of Africa. They were jealous to protect.
You call it as jealousy?
Jealous in the sense that they were jealous of what they have. That is, they have that desire to protect the resources they have, to protect the life of the people, even in the area of culture. So when Arabs wanted to just come and adopt a form of economic imperialism to actually deplete the gold resources, just to go to Andalusia or Iberian zone or Portugal or Spain to build there, these people build strong political system and strong political consolidation that actually led to the establishment of Ghana Empire. Arabs could not just they could not enter, they had to succumb to the demand of the political system. But look at today. In 2016, when Gambia there was political change in the Gambia, instead of elites of this country think of how to stabilize themselves, how to actually assess internal resource base of this country, they were only thinking of how to go to China and reaffirm their diplomatic alignment or strengthen and consolidating their diplomatic relations with China so that China will actually pump money. They were only interested in money. But the consequence of that money was never thought by those elites. So they didn't understand that because they don't understand, they don't have the knowledge of the contemporary global system. And that is why Gambia needs to reflect what is independent. If a political actor who wanted to adopt a system that will actually open your country to be supported financially by another country, especially industrial world, which means that industrial world is actually eyeing on your strategic resources. I don't know very well. That may and exploit that maximally, and it may actually render you people vulnerable in the global economic system. So you can understand that the foreign ministry of this country in 2016-17 declared that Gambia will be actually aligned to China, because not any other thing is based on what they will get from China in terms of capital. But China in turn will need your maritime resources, your sea. China will actually need your ecology, your forests and other areas. I pay attention here. And is China going to actually exploit those resources on sustainable basis on your part? This is it. So these people who do not understand, and people thought they have the imagination and intelligence and the knowledge of time to actually assess the internal condition and actually make use of what we have, and strategically they can develop that. We have actually market outside, and the country will be in position to export, rather than taking maybe 700,000 euro or 7 million euro or 20 million euro from China. At the end of the day, your maritime resources, your sea will be open to China, and China will actually fish.
So Doctor,
so look at the independent in this context. Independence is not about establishing a government. Independence starts with what type of political minds, what type of minds, what extent of the imagination, true pragmatic intellectual sophistication of your political actors. They rushed to China in 2016. One, it is not even meant to strategically connect Gambia to China for national interest, normally to actually strategically align to China as a kind of mean to build their parties, because they were all using the transition, I can very well, to build their party in order to emerge winners in this country. They by actually giving Gambia to succumb to the vulnerable, but to succumb to the destruction of an industrial world.
So it's like if I can understand very well, it means they play with the citizens.
No, they themselves don't have the knowledge of the time. That might have given knowledge of time means having capacity to understand the feeling of your people in every aspect of their existence. I get it very well here. Their interest is not the national interest. The interest is to actually, number one, build their political domination, consolidation as parties. You can understand that strategically the connection was for China to pump money. Out of that, you can understand that some of the actors during that time, they are leading parties, and they are making everything to make sure that they use that as an opportunity to actually accumulate resources for their parties, because they were using the transition purposely for, but not for the people. They don't have the knowledge of time and knowledge of history. That's why they could not operate to do anything that is exceptional during that transition period. But the transition was to align with the capitalist world, getting loans, and then grant one to open your maritime area for the exploitation of the capitalist industrial China.
So one would say, despite all that you are saying, China is the one who built the Sadaura Carabao Conference Hall. Chinese are sending some of their medical persons to come and help the Gambia. Some people.
Yeah. But China will not do those things, for nothing. China, you have to understand, this is modern global system. You get me very well here. Nation states, we are going out. You understand? One, to look for other very natural areas where they could tap to build their people, because Chinese people were taken to independence by Mao. Mao was quite different from Sir Dawda Jawara. Mao was actually a Chinese personality. We did not have an African personality in this country at the time of independence to build this country, to be sensitive to the life of the people. And that could be only be felt by that person if that person is fully connected and conscious of the history of the people. Mao made Chinese people to be conscious of Chinese nationalism and spirit. Okay, those people in the Gambia were actually transformed, and they adopt themselves as capitalist personality, building and adopting a system and the condition for their own interests and their influence in this. That's why Gambia could not move anywhere. That's why Kwame Nkrumah's independence is quite different from the Gambian independence. When you attain independence, first of all, you need to question yourself. What was actually seized from all that might have constituted our dependent on a particular forces or minority colonial forces? The question needs to be raised. I get it very well here. First of all, colonial system, what colonial system is to constrain the capacity of the people to dictate policies. Capacities of the people, not so to influence policies, at the same time to be in control of policies.
So at the time when Gambia gained its independence in 1965, from there Saraula became a president also, and were you not satisfied with the little progress that were happening, like, few people going to school and chiefs?
No. What I am trying to tell you is that, first of all, question that had to be raised by the people who wanted to actually extricate Gambian or Gambia as a nation state from the hegemon, from the peripheral condition, from the control of outsider, from being dependent on two questions that need to be asked. What was actually taken from us? That is what I was saying. One, colonial system actually constrain number one, your capacity as a citizen. You were not actually a citizen of colonial government. You were a subject because you could not influence anything. Today you are a citizen of the Gambia. You have entitlements, but during the colonial you didn't have it. So whenever the independence was attained, at the time that we attained independence, question then had to be raised is what was taken away from us that might have actually constituted our dependence. One, political and economy. Gambian people and West African zone was self-contained. They were self-sufficient in terms of food. Before the rise of colonial production system that actually shifts us from the cereal-based production to that of cash crop production.
So therefore, Doctor...
Wait, you understand what I mean here? At that point in time, peanut was never actually an immediate need or demand or staple for the Gambian people. When it was introduced, because of the colonial minority domination, they dictate policies and people had to actually cultivate at the expense of the rice. Environment was completely destroyed because peanut cannot be grown in a jungle, in a forest. But rice could cope with those kind of ecological conditions can be adopted in that. But in this situation that we need to understand as far as that story is concerned, trajectories are concerned. Here is you were actually controlled. You were not actually influencing anything because you were not incorporated or co-opted to participate in the decision making. So the decision that was made was in accordance or in response to satisfy the demand of the European capitalist and industrial world. That's why your economy became a peanut or cash crop economy. So this led to the rise of the downfall of cereal production that actually constitute our staple. You get me very well? We became dependent on the market. So the question that need to be raised, it was the power, colonial power, that constrained the people from actually, constrained the people's capacity to influence. So first of all is to actually build the people in capacity of the people. That's why Kwame Nkrumah, what he attempted first is to build universities and institutions of technology, to build people's capacity in terms of their understanding of how government govern the people. I pay attention. And second stage is economy, approach to economy. Okosombo Dam was established in order to actually take care of the energy for production and reproduction in Africa. But was our independence constituted that was characterized by these steps in this country? Because colonial forces imposed a capitalist personality, so Dauda was never an African personality. That's why from the independent, you were not allowed to get access to university in your country. Access to university education in your country for the first time. One, you will be able to understand the history of your people through the publications books that were published by great Pan-African scholars. Many of us don't know anything about Sek Anta Diop, what he wrote about Black Africa, what we wrote about the contribution of Black Africa in terms of in terms of actually influencing global civilization. We did not know. It's just now University of the Gambia students read about Sek Anta Diop. It's just now they are reading about many Pan-African scholars Why? Because those things were not instituted. Even our people who were sent away to study, they were not interested in history. And if you don't understand your history, even if you are educated, you will not have the feeling of your people, because it is the history that will serve as a kind of a magnet for you to be connected to your people in every aspect of their existence. And that's where Kwame Nkrumah and other people were adopted. They adopt themselves, and they were able to actually say or threaten the entire capitalist world in that time. So university education was constant, but it was never just to limit the people in order for them to be able to actually serve as hegemonic forces. So Sir Dawda and others serve as colonial forces, minority elite dominant. And secondly, there was no actually significant structural change in the establishment of colonial government. You know, if you look at the structure of colonial government, one, you have to understand, both legislative and executive were fused, not so. I pay attention here. And even the people were not allowed. But when we got the independence, people voted for their National Assembly member in the legislative election to go and represent them so that they could actually constrain the executive. But you can understand that in order to actually institute a system of despotism in this country, Sir Dawda hijacked people's mandate by appointing their MPs as ministers. They became members of executive in the cabinet, at the same time MPs. How could they scrutinize themselves effectively? So you see how tactically, the man institute despotic system of government by actually detaching people. Because if you understand that, if Bibi Dabo was the Minister of Finance, was sent to the parliament by the people of Dumbuto or Kiang, how will he be able to actually criticize, scrutinize, check and balance his ministry and his peers in that parliament? How will he be able to? The same people in the cabinet. Where was democracy for 30 years? This is how the man darkened the entire system in this country. And once people were darkened, they were completely cut off from the world. People did not know anything. They did not even know their right. The man himself portrayed himself as human right. Human right. Champion, ruling the dark people who were ignorant. That's why television station will not be provided for you for 30 years, so that you will not understand, become conscious of what was going on in the world. So now, if people, all these things could not be available. That's why our independence, because people were not built. You build the nation in order to actually create strong nation state. But if people were not built, you can't do that. So you can understand people who were educated earlier were not educated to take care of the life of the people. They were not sensitive to the life of the people. Most of those educated people don't know anything about Africa, don't know anything about the black man and its evolution. They will not be sensitive and black relation in history with other racial world. So we have elites who are capitalist personality. We are built to position themselves to actually create conditions for sustainable Western industrial domination and capitalist domination. That's constituted our peripheral condition in the global system.
So is this still continuing?
It is still continuing. We can still see the continuity because we are still dependent. We are making our road, we are taking, where are we getting the phone? We are getting the phone from the capitalist world. And once we are taking loan on yearly basis, part of your budget will be dedicated to actually pay off that loan. So which means that a little amount will be catered for you to take care of internal matters. But expansion in terms of industrialization, to create opportunities for job will be constrained, owing to our continuous dependence, taking loans and other things, because budgetary condition will not be better, will not be actually strategic to create industrial condition to expand job.
So, Doctor, definitely then how can we stop this now or change the narrative now?
Yeah, that is where I said we have certificated elites in this government, certificated elites in the country. They will tell people are not educated, this is not educated, you are educated. Which form of education do you have? You are educated, you don't even understand your people, and you don't have the feeling of your people. Your going to the government is to make sure that how you will create conditions where you'll be able to actually loot, to come and build your private space. You destroy the public space, which means looting public space. That is doing corruption. You are educated. And then you come and build private space. The money that's supposed to build the public space, roads, electricity to expand opportunities for job, you are taking that to your home. That's why you can see many private compounds are well built. But when you go to the public, you see many, actually you see water pools along the way. Because public funds that are supposed to build, construct the road and other things have been actually stolen to build a private space. We need to look at the private public space thesis in the African condition.
Doctor, this is
where is the independent now? So the required capacity to build people, first of all, you need to have knowledge of self. When you talk about knowledge of self, I get it very well. Ministry of Education, for example, if people working at the Ministry of Basic Education don't have the required knowledge of Africa, don't have historical knowledge and the culture of this country, how will they be able to build a sound curriculum that will respond and take care of cultural independence of our people? In your curriculum still now, they maintain a proverb that says black sheep of the family.
That's it, Doctor.
Is that not so? Is that not so, black sheep of the family?
You keep on reading that.
I keep on doing that. They themselves are not educated, they don't have the knowledge of self. They can't institute a system of curriculum that will liberate our people. Because knowledge of self is to identify African scholars who probably works on Africa, that will actually change or alter the wrong orientation and create new orientation for African man to be actually proud of his or her existence and be prepared to pursue and get knowledge, not so, and to actually help the people, be sensitive to the life of the people against any form of marginalization, any form of vulnerability. First of all, what I've been saying now, African scholars who wrote, they talk about the condition in Africa. For example, Charles Darwin, when he was writing, he actually positioned black man as very unintelligible. Montesquieu, what he wrote about Africa, he said he could not understand why God even put this soul in us for us to be in existence. So they talk about a lot Africa as monkeys, which means that we are human monkeys and whatever. You see how people tend to portray us. And these people who went to land, they read about all these things. And you can understand that they also, when educated people, when they came back to Africa, they assumed the position of a white man, so marginalize our people. But Charles Darwin wrote this thing. All other Western writers, anti-black writers, scholars who wrote, they actually wrote this book and they actually published them and they adopt them in their curriculum. Students in the Western world will read them from primary school, secondary school. All these ideas of Western supremacy and white supremacy.
So they will
and their concept, it is perpetuated into them. And they actually rationalize it, adopt it, and it is made true in their perception of a black man. Minister of Basic Education who are ignorant of African history and the scholars who wrote about Africa, especially when it comes to cradle history of human being. When we talk about cradle, human genesis, to understand who was who in that early period of human emergence, who were black people, who injected or supplied civilization and humanity. This could have been included and summarized, put it in our curriculum. Our students, our Africa, when they learn, they will know who a black man is. If Charles Darwin is representing the Western man, not so. He was behind the conception of white supremacy. It was Sek Anta Job who served as a man behind black man as the best man in the world. Black in terms of knowledge, in terms of creator of the civilization of the entire world. How could you, this country cannot be independent. It's a fool, because Ministry of Basic Education, whatever program they want to adopt, they depend on the World Bank. They depend on the Western institutions to support them and dictate them how they are supposed to do all these things. Whatever they are dictated by those who are. How would they be able to introduce a curriculum that will actually respond to our independence? So where is independence need to be conceptualized, need to be interpreted in a realistic manner, not in a falsified sense. So our elites in the system don't consider them. That's why you can understand that. You see, Western man, we say Western people are capitalists, but in their own country, they are not capitalists. You can see welfare system. I listened to Khalifa's debate, and people didn't listen very carefully. Looking at what we can actually, how we can assess our internal condition, how we can develop or utilize our internal resources, build capabilities in science and technology, and trying to move with that within the context, internally, and adopt a framework where we live with our neighbors. Because we are from the same cultural origin, like Senegal, Guinea-Bissau, Guinea-Conakry. So how we can deal with in terms of exchange to build. But people, instead of even pursuing that, the isolated African neighboring countries, they will fly to China because they believe in capital. I pay attention. That's why the transition period, the foreign ministry, it used that transition period to actually open this country. He actually arrested this country. He captured this country like a captive. We are captives. I get it very well here. Kidnap this country and hand over the entire Gambia. Foreign ministry in 2016, 2017, hand over to the industrial China. And we are facing the impact at this point in time. And people consider those people educated, whatever title they assign. They don't understand that these are the actors who are ignorant of the world system, especially the world system that we are, because they are wretched brains.
So, yeah, Doctor, now, on Saturday, we're going to the Independence Stadium to celebrate the independence you are talking about. Yeah, so number one, are you in support of that independence celebration, in fact, or is it meaningful?
No. I think we need a kind of a new framework. We need to adopt a new framework towards celebrating an independence. That we need to engage ourselves in dialogue. We need to actually identify scholars, experienced people, politicians who understand this country, those who actually study this country from the milling stage. You see, we need to adopt what is called scientific approach in politics. And when we say scientific approach, that is systematic approach, we need to adopt that. How do you study the nation, Gambia as a nation state? From the time of independence up to now, most of the political parties don't understand anything about those things. Are you paying attention? They don't even understand. And if those things are not understood, how will you be able to actually adopt a new something? So you need to take, that's why if you can understand the context in which PDOI adopt, is very scientific and systematic. They look at the economy. They studied economy. They study every aspect. So they study the system. That's why for example, if you study the system anytime and you have been studying the system, understand it, you will be able to understand the shortcomings and you will be able to actually find a way to create and solve the problem. That's why when we went in for political change in 2016, 2017, most of the actors we think they thought they are educated, could not even influence any meaningful or relevant or significant political change or reform because they don't understand the context of governance. From Jawara, Yaya Jammeh, they didn't understand anything. Their interest was how to change, how to actually influence political change or how to effect change in order for them to position themselves because they were position-oriented and inclined.
So they focus on position.
Yeah, that's why those people, how do you consider them as what? As liberators of this country. Their interest was just, let me become a leader. And the Kora players will just glorify me. And people will shout after me, and it will just be written in history that I once ruled. It's a history that you are making for you and your family. But we are thinking of nine nations. That should be well assessed. Not so? So that we can institute a system that will actually generate both political and economic independence for the people.
So Gambia before independence and Gambia after independence.
We are evolving as a nation. We can say that we did not have the university during Jawara's time. I don't know very well. And then there was kind of actually human resource imbalance in the country. But once President Jammeh and his government established a university, not so, it altered that imbalance. The status quo changed completely. You get me very well? People became educated, manpower, not so. So you can see the change. Even though later President Jammeh, we have seen change in his political, life. You get me very well here. So many Gambians became very educated. They are becoming very conscious of the governance. You understand? They want to create the best for them. But what we need, as far as whether they are educated, they are reading books, if they don't have the spirit of their people as Africans, if they don't learn history to know who their people were, still now they will remain to pursue resources, capital in the government and loot the resources of the government just to build their family, but public space will be left isolated. And that is what is giving us problem at this point in time. You get me very well? If the Empire of Ghana can establish a state of Ghana just in order to protect the gold resources in Ghana, why should we, after political change in the modern time, instead of assessing the internal strategic resource condition to build strong resource base to build our economy, why should you fly to China in 2006 just because what? You luring or you are attracting China to come and invade your ecology and your maritime resources. Are these people who can fight independence? Not so? Like how Kwame Nkrumah fought independence. Because Kwame Nkrumah generated another energy Okosombo Dam to take care of our industrialization on sustainable basis. So this is how you approach national independence, looking at the economy. First of all, look at the nation and build the capacity of that nation. You get it very well? So that your country will be well positioned. We are operating within a world system. You need to be conscious of that world system and its dynamics and forces.
Yeah, now when it comes to, let's say, the Africa, the regional integration you're talking, what is your view on that? Because people are saying there's no...
on the part of the Gambian people. We were born and elders gathered. Our griots came and they actually celebrated that birthday, naming ceremony. They tuned chorus, Mbahal, Riti and others. You get me very well here. They say Colonel and others. You get me very well. To demonstrate to you that this is our heritage. A very good heritage for that matter. People gather to celebrate that. An educated person, a very stupid educated person in the Gambia, in order to adopt those kind of tradition in a modern context, they didn't look at that traditional context, adopt it in the modern context to celebrate birthday for their children for continuity. They just try to actually cut their children from that, try to imitate a Western form, and actually they will bring a sugary cake. I pay attention. They don't even in the celebration or in the singing, they don't even want them to actually sing, make a celebrate that in their own songs. They say happy birthday to you.
Doctor.
This is where you can understand. An educated man in the Gambia, in the Western education, you mean who is actually adopting a child or who is creating a shift in terms of cultural pathway away from your African tradition. Those people, will they be able to create any system of governance that will respond to the needs of the people? No, don't think about that. Because their brain, an imitative brain, will institute a system they imitate. They look at the people and say, this is a system in America, this is a system there. They come and adopt it when it has no cultural alignment with our realities. Muhammad Gaddafi came and he wanted to intervene because he understood that capitalist industrial world are exploiting African people. In which form? Europe destroyed Africa in so many ways through colonialism, slave trade. Are you following me very well? To the extent that it became very difficult for Africa to take giant steps to restore order. Because in the first place, any country that does not have or that is not in control of technology can never constitute a core or assume any significant position in the global capitalist system. I pay attention here. So we are only consumers and laborers. That's why we are always say peanut is our cash crop in the Gambia. We are only producing. But technology that's supposed to be at your disposal, utilize IPN internally to produce your own oil, to supply your people, to produce certain things, to supply, it's not in play. Because you don't have budgetary line condition that can actually facilitate that. So that constrains our building capacity in technology. If you look at that, Europe, they already have built technology is already there. They have the sophistication. They can produce and reproduce, and what manufactured goods will be brought to Africa. This is what Gaddafi understood. And not only that, our reserves are in the Western banks. Is that not so? You get me very well here. So now, whenever you want to take loan to build or construct a road, you must go and take huge millions. In paying that, you have to pay it with huge interest. That will create a budgetary constraint for you. Gaddafi said, let me build African Development Bank, where you come and take loan without any interest that will constrain your budget. So this is a kind of a step to bring Africa together economically, and it may later enhance political integration. So Gaddafi was taking a very good step.
So as of now, do you
have manpower in Africa? If you have educated people in Gambia, but you need to understand their mind. whether these people are Africans in nature or these people are imitative Africans in nature. You get me very well? You see, this is what needs to be, like colonial system where only concentrating on along the coastal areas, not so. Why? Because new production system require them to come to the coastal area to transport their goods, not so. But during the Atlantic slave trade, they were in the hinterland, in the north also. So their relocations of their centers, not so, was created according to their needs and demand. When we attain independence, what we should do, we need to alter those things. Our capital should have been established in the hinterland. Coastal areas will remain viable, and this may constrain urban migrations. You get me very rural urban migration, but they maintain the colonial structural system where rural areas, which were protectorate, they became rural area, and the urban areas in the Gambia were the colonies. So what did we change structurally?
All right. So finally, Doctor, time has gone. One last question is: we've mentioned Europeans, we've mentioned the Chinese, and which one is better? Is either Europeans or the Chinese in terms of colonizing us or dealing with?
Every nation state wants to go out. Every industrial nation wants to go out. I pay attention. In order to access resources, ecologies, maritime resources, in order to actually supplement their internal resources or what they don't actually have. I get it very well. So don't say that who is better, the interests of the nations. You get it very well here. We need to align ourselves to people based on mutual interests. But the interests, not so. Where you, first of all, you will have equal capacity. But how could you actually be in that way where you don't have the capacity? They have the capacity more than you. And you think that it will be mutual to your extent. No, they will not. Because this place is going to be their market. I get it very well. So you need to know that whatever you are doing, you should adopt a system and condition where you will never allow your zone to be a market for industrial world. But you you create your own market in their own home.
All right, Doctor. Thank you very much. And finally, your final message?
Finally, independence needs to be reconceptualized. That is, people need to understand it, interpret it, understand it in a realistic form. I pay attention here. When you say we are independent, we are voting. But we don't have independent personalities, even who are educated. I get it very well. Independent personalities who are educated. I talked to you about the black sheep, for example, of the family. You and I, we are all black people, not so. If you are portraying the symbolic, if you are giving a very nasty symbolic representation of black color, and that child is black, you think that child will actually value you as a black man? Black sheep of the family. Anything that is black must be associated with something that is devilish, something that is actually bad. Huh? Look at that. Black people are reading this thing to their own children in schools. Our educated people are mentally slaves, especially the MOPSI, because they don't conceptualize Africa to create a curriculum that will liberate our people. Charles Darwin created something that actually positioned black man to as an intelligent person. Theorists came to position black man in a nasty way. What do we do in response to those kind of conceptions? And we create new perception for our people. Independence requires this, that you need to deal with your human personalities and create national personalities of your own area.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much, Doctor. Yeah. Thank you very much. Until next time, this is your favorite program, Bankola Kuwo, that comes your way every Sunday from 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock. And I am your host, Shirif Conte. And Thank you once again. Until next week.